everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our live virtual event with Ginger Gaffney, author of the memoir Half Broke, and Pam Houston, author of Deep Creek and the upcoming book Airmail, Letters of Politics, Pandemics, and Place. I'm Lane Jacobson, the owner of Paulina Springs Books in Sisters, Oregon, and this event is part of Books in Common Northwest, a virtual event series that we created alongside Madison Books in Seattle and Country Bookshelf in Bozeman, Montana. Before we release the event is being recorded, and after the event concludes, you can view the recording by going to booksincommonNW.com or visiting the Books in Common Northwest YouTube channel. There is a link to buy your copy of both authors' books in the chat, and we'll be dropping that link back into the chat periodically. If you have any questions for either or both authors, just click the Q&A back in. We hope you'll visit the Books in Common Northwest YouTube channel where the event is being streamed live. If you have any audio issues, we recommend trying headphones, and that usually does the trick. We would like to remind everyone that this is a shared creative space, and we ask that we all be respectful of everyone else who has joined us tonight. Offensive comments and or questions will see the user dismissed from the event. And last reminder that this event is part of a series. You can view a full calendar of upcoming events and recordings of past events at booksincommonNW.com. And we've got a lot of other exciting events coming up, including one with Craig Johnson, author of the Longmire Mystery Series, which is this Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And now, with all of that out of the way, I'd like to introduce our authors for the evening. Ginger Gaffney is the author of the memoir Half Broke. She's a top-ranked horse trainer and has worked with horses and their people for over 25 years. She received an MFA from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, and her work has been published in Tin House and Utne Reader. She lives in Velarde, New Mexico. Pam Houston is the prize-winning author of the memoir Deep Creek and the upcoming Airmail, Letters of Politics, Pandemics, and Place, and is also a contributing author to the new book Alone Together, Love, Grief, and Comfort During the Time of COVID-19. She is professor of English at the University of California, Davis, and lives on a ranch at 9,000 feet in Colorado near the headwaters of the Rio Grande. She is also the first author that we hosted at Paulina Springs after I had taken over the store. So she will always hold a special place in my heart, which I know she does for many others who are tuning in tonight. And it was something really special to jam like 120 people into that space, and 2 Irish wolfhounds also. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to our authors, and I'll be back later in the evening to field some questions from the audience.
Huge Irish wolfhounds, I just want to say. And hi, Lane, I didn't recognize you with your hat on, but it's so nice to see you again. That was such a wonderful night. Take it away, Ginger.
Yeah, well, Irish wolfhounds will come to play throughout this little, they might even come in the background of Pam's house there. Hi, everybody. So glad to be here. So grateful to be here, because I know, and Pam does too, we love the West. We're Westerners, and it's so fun to have this group of stores hosting us. And so I just want to thank Paulina, the Springs Bookstore, the Country Bookshelf, and Madison Books in Seattle. So thanks for having us. We're really glad to be here. And Lane, thank you so much, because I was supposed to be part of a book festival that happened for you this fall, and so we can't do it, but at least we can do this. And I know that you were super supportive of my book early on, so thank you so much. Anyhow, I feel like this is a little bit of a wrap up of things that matter the most to me and matter the most to Pam, which is bookstores in the West and the West in general. So I'll talk to you a little bit about my book, which is Half Broke. I'm going to show you a picture of it. Between Santa Fe and Taos. Oh, there we go. Henry. See, I told you there was going to be Irish wolfhounds coming into the picture. Oh, Henry. And so, and speaking of horses, Henry, Henry's kind of like a horse line. I could hear one of them more than the other, and they were in a very loud kitchen, and they were kind of screaming over the noise about how the horses were hurting people, and how the horses had been hurt. And And I was like, what is going on here? That's how I got introduced to Delancey Street Foundation, which is maybe 5 miles from my home. They have horses there. They're a prison alternative. And to be honest, I never had worked with anybody in the juvenile system or in the prison system. So I know horses, but I didn't know that thing that was over on the other side of the river from me. I had heard about it. And so most of the people at the ranch, I'll tell you a little bit about the ranch because you have to know a little bit about the ranch so you can understand the book. But people there are long-term drug addicts who have been in and out of prison for multiple times. Some have just been in jail and are there serving out a small sentence. Some are there serving out 16 years. And when they come to Delancey Street across the river, their sentences, if they make it and the judge says, yes, you can come, their sentence get drastically reduced. If they make it the whole time. Like if you go from a 12-year sentence, you can get it down to six years. But there's a really hard interview process to get them into Delancey Street. It's a 17-acre so-called ranch. There's about the max 120 people that live there. Like I said, multiple offenders. There is no staff. It's all peer run. So if any of you are listening, you'll understand that if you're counselors or if you've worked in the prison system, you have to realize there was no professional staff there. So it's all peer run. It's been peer run since the 1970s. And it started in San Francisco. They have an LA, Los Angeles organization, and they have 5 other locations or so around the country. But here in New Mexico is their only rural location. So about 7 years ago, I got this call, not knowing any of that I just told you. And I walked into a situation where the horses were literally chasing people after breakfast and lunch and dinner. Once they were taking their trash out from the kitchen, they had to get across the field where the horses were and to get to the dumpsters to take their trash there. And the horses would be at the far end of like a 10-acre pasture, and they'd see the trash carriers coming and they'd start just heads down, ears back, chasing the trash carriers all the way to the dumpster. And they had started carrying sticks that they carved in their wood shop so that they could protect themselves. So there was the trash carriers, and then there were 4 or 5 guys around the trash carriers that were fending off the horses. These were the things that came across the phone line that first time. But then I got to see it one of the first days I went there. I asked them, go ahead, bring the trash out. I want to see what happens. And it was something like you'd never experienced. So that's the kind of like where the book takes off. It covers that first year and a half of the time I've spent there. I want to like kind of deviate a little bit and talk about me and my entrance into that situation. I am a gay woman. I've been queer since I can't even remember, though I had some confusion about it in college, tried a few things out in college, but then realized I'm definitely queer. I also wasn't quite sure what gender I was when I was in my early years, all the way up until like when I was 15, maybe even longer, probably even to my 20s. But I now know I am a female, so I am not a they and I'm not a he, I'm a she. But it took a long time for me to figure out gender. And I give this example, and I'm not sure if I put it in the book, but I almost put it in the book, which is this Thanksgiving dinner with my family and my mother and father and my grandparents on my mother's side and all my sisters. And my Uncle Jerry, who was just back from Valley Forge Military Academy. He was my mother's youngest brother. And we all were gathering for Thanksgiving, and he came in with his first mustache, and I remember I was sitting next to him and I was like, oh, he looks so good. Look at that hair on his face. And I got this 14-year-old, 13-year-old girl excitement. And I remember saying out loud, at the table. And I really don't remember exactly what age I was, because I think one of my sisters is here on this Zoom call, so I don't, I know she'll be questioning me about it, but I was young. And I remember saying at Thanksgiving table, I can't not wait till I grow my mustache. I am going to have a fabulous mustache. And I was so sure of that then. And so all that to say is that I had my own big time confusions, and then ensued a number of years of not knowing where I belonged, what gender I belonged in, what group of people I belonged in culture. Especially, I did not know, I knew I didn't fit in the heterosexual culture. And I've been thinking a little bit about talking about this tonight, because I think my book is about finding a place where I belong for the first time in my life, a full out feeling of belonging. And it was at this ranch with 120 people who have been in and out of prison, who've had major amounts of trauma. And I don't mean to say that lightly, because I got kind of critiqued on that with my New York Times book review. She kind of critiqued, the woman who did the critiqued me on it, and you can look it up. But it's not a light thing when you don't belong, and it's not something you get to join in with Black Lives Matter just because I was gay and I didn't know what my gender was. But I truly feel like a whole lot of people don't feel like they belong. And we all have the fucking right to feel that way, and nobody gets to take that away from you. No critique in the New York Times can take that away from you. You know what you lived through. And there's no winning this war of who belongs more or less. Lydia Yuknovich said, nobody wins the suffering war. But what that kind of feeling gives you is a longing, not necessarily a belonging, but a longing to find who are your people. And this time we're in now, if nothing else, that's where we are. And we can talk about the fact that Donald Trump doesn't have empathy skills, but we have the skills, and we have the skills towards longing towards belonging, and so I'm gonna want to read. The other thing I want to say about belonging is there's something a friend of mine said to me the other day. It was like, maybe we don't want to belong. Maybe some of us just really don't want to belong anymore to this mass culture that we are. We're not, what are we longing towards, And I think that is exactly what Black Lives Matters brought up, is like, what are we longing towards? Because belonging doesn't mean the mass culture that I didn't feel accustomed to or felt comfortable in or felt supported by. And I haven't really gotten very political in my book readings, but I've been feeling more so as this time comes along where our election comes up. And it's really why I wanted Pam to read from her new book, which is Airmail. It's just coming out October 13th by Tory Press. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But this book is so fierce and so important right now that I wanted her not to just be in conversation with me, but I wanted her to read from it so that everybody who knows and loves Pam, and if you don't even know and love Pam, get out and read this book. It's fantastic. But anyhow, maybe we don't want to belong. Maybe we're longing for something else. And that's the thought I'm having right now at this time. And I want to thank my friend for giving me that thought. But and that's for men and women and straight and white and any kind of color. I think there's a lot of us longing for something way different than what's being offered, and we're ready. So I wanted to read from a chapter called Learning to Walk. See where my glasses are. And why I want to read from this chapter is because one of the first things I did when I got to the ranch was that I noticed in the residents there that they had the same sort of patterns of movement that I had when I was younger, and like a lot of it is just self-hatred and self-loathing. But a lot of the people at the ranch also carry a lot of anger from their issues from childhood, as well as just being in prison for so long and just having to like buck it up and be mad so they can get through. So what I tried to do when I first got there and I saw everybody, it was like just teach them to walk a walk that didn't exude anger, but it also didn't exude trauma. They either were walking with their heads down and just beat down, or they were walking like they were ready to punch somebody out. And I had to teach them how to walk differently in order to get along with the horses, because either one of those options, the horses are just going to run. They're going to run away from you if you're like terrorizing with them with your anger, or if you think so little of yourself that you can't hold yourself up. So this is a chapter that I'm going to start kind of like in the middle of, and there's a main character named Randy that like he really comes a long way in his attitude in this chapter. So I bet you're going to get to meet a number of people in the book. So I'm hoping that that interests you. So here's Randy. These horses, they don't mess with me. I'm not scared of them. Randy announces as he struts back into the lineup, shoulders slouched forward, arms doing a downward punch, popping up and down off his toes. I know horses. I used to work with them on the track in Florida, and I'm not afraid of these ponies. I look over at the other men who are all shaking their heads. Oh, I say, well, good. Then why don't you head over to the trailer and untie Billy? She's part thoroughbred. Second one from the right with 2 white socks. Untie her, then bring her over. Randy's eyes squeeze shut in a long blink. When they open again, he's batting them side to side. You want me to do what? He asks. I repeat myself as he shuffles his feet and looks at the ground. He gives his head a good shake, and the shimmy of it travels down his baggy jeans. A few moments pass as he manages to put his hammering body back together, leaving for the trailer at a much slower clip. The other residents break the line and come behind me in a semicircle. The horses are standing at my trailer, each tied with a chain of slip knots and a lock at the end of each one. Randy's first challenge will be to tuck his enormous body between my 2 biggest horses and release those knots, standing only inches away from Billy's mouth. He stops at the corner of my trailer and points to Moo, my Morgan gelding, who's tied at the near end of my trailer. This one? Randy asks. No, dude, the next one. What, you can't see the difference? Tony interrupts. He's been stone quiet so far today. Tony hangs on to control by believing he's the smartest fish in this tank, and he may be, but that doesn't necessarily make him a good man. Omar, Paul, and Rex all look away from Tony and back to me. You want some help, Randy? I've been holding myself in place, rocking my body back and forth, trying to suppress my desire to run in there and rescue him. You want me to go in there, untie her, and do what? Randy's shaking a little, his lips no longer pinched tight, but held apart and panting. There's no way I can go in there, Miss Ginger, and there's no way, he confesses. I walk over to the trailer with all the residents coming behind me. Everyone likes to say that we can't show our horses any fear, but I disagree. What they need most is honesty. If you're truly honest about how you feel, your body will show it. The horses know the difference. You've got to let that fear leave your body, Randy. Slow down and take a breath. And you can do this. Randy steps into the thin space between the 2 horses, cussing, fuck this, a few times. Lay your hand on her rump, Randy. Let her feel you. Randy lifts his arm above Billy's tall rump and places his palm on her bronze brown coat. Now walk up to her head. Allow your hand to travel up and along her back as you go. That's nice, Randy. Good job. Randy's face hangs loose from its frame, his anger no longer able to cling to the usual bony attachments. I coach him up the lead rope. He unlocks the slip knots, releases each one down the chain, He is quiet now, gaining confidence in the steamy space between two equine bodies. Now back her out. Take your lead rope, face her head, and walk into her chest. Don't be too strong with your hands. Billy doesn't need that. Billy came to me as a rescue, aggressive, protective, and skinny. I'll never know her whole story, but what I do know is if you want to fight, she'll meet you there. She's quick to watch and read people. Over the last 3 years, she's shown me how to be more patient, to listen, and to not be afraid to show my own weakness. She has stripped me of my false pride. Billy is an amazing athlete, and she's troubled. This combination demands complete honesty. Billy looks straight back at Randy like a soldier to a sergeant. Her eyes stick to his face. Her hind legs ready themselves and shift back as Randy takes his first step toward the middle of her chest. Together they pull out and away from the trailer, with Randy taking long, deliberate strides, sweat pouring off his forehead. All the men, minus Tony, huddle around Randy and Billy as they clear the trailer, slapping him hard on his back. Good job, Randy. Rex starts scratching Billy's forehead. She's beautiful, isn't she? Randy hands me the lead rope and bends over at the waist, hands on his knees, breathing heavy. I gotta sit down, man. I think I'm gonna faint. Marcus and Rex grab Randy under his shoulders and hold him up. They scoot him over to the edge of the road next to a small irrigation ditch and sit his weakened body down. I walk behind Randy, still holding Billy, and lay my left hand on his shoulder. I want to tell him how proud I am, but I hold back. Instead, I stand in silence behind him, watching his breath labor up and down. Rex, Marcus, and Paul have come alive and want my attention. They walk up the road together, each with their own unique style of ease, effort, and expression. They want to touch the horses like Randy has, and they'll do whatever it takes to get that chance. All three of these men are athletes. Their ripped stomachs peek out from the thin space between their shirt hems and jeans. All have biceps rounding beneath their sweatshirts. The hidden shapes look like overinflated tennis balls. Rex, the tallest, could be a runner. Paul, a football player. Marcus, soccer. Sober and clean, for a year or two, their eyes sparkle white around intent pupils. Marcus walks up the road like he's gliding on air. He no longer looks like the tight bodybuilder I met on my first visit. His body swings loosely like a sailor who's been off to sea for months. His hips undulate like waves. His torso rocks on top of that surface. You look good today, Marcus, I tell him. I don't know what has changed, but you look very relaxed. I start my workout tomorrow, Miss Ginger. He smiles and tells me I have a few interviews already lined up. Oh, Marcus, that's so great. I'm so happy for you, and I want to get your phone number. Please, let's stay in touch, I tell him. Paul holds out his wrist on his return. He wants me to look it over to see if it has healed enough to work with the horses today. 2 weeks ago, when Hawk mauled Paul during the evening feeding routine, he knocked Paul down in front of one of the big cottonwood trees and then went about eating his hay. Paul caught his fall with his right hand. He's lucky he didn't break that wrist. Today, it's still a little swollen around the joints, but he no longer needs to wear the wrist brace the doctor gave him. I hand Billy's lead rope to Rex and ask Paul to put his right hand in mine. Gather around, you guys. I want to show you something. I walk Paul over to the center of the group, still holding his hand. Paul, will you take me for a walk, please? I'll be the horse and you're the trainer. How will you ask me to come along? With his good hand, Paul squeezes hard around my palm and pulls me forward. I resist. My arm strings out in front of me. Paul's pulling and laughing. My legs are fence posts pounded in the ground 3 feet deep. Being a fourth-generation prisoner, Paul's not accustomed to subtlety. He walks like a gangster, with his shoulders rolled forward from his thick neck. His hands are the size of plates, arms as wide as my thighs. I watch his legs waddle up the road like a bodybuilder on steroids. Don't pull on me. Give me a signal. something that tells me you're getting ready to walk. You know, give me a gesture. Paul leans forward from his waist, taking my hand in a lighter hold, and presents himself as a partner would, asking me to dance. His skin takes on the texture of a kiss. I follow his suggestion and we walk up the road. As he walks, I can feel every hesitant, self-conscious step. It is strange to feel such doubt in a man who has had to be so strong to survive. I reflect back to him his own uncertainties by pausing momentarily. He stops and gestures again to move us forward. We move together, melded back to the group. I stand next to Paul, talking to the other members of the livestock team, teaching them about the complexities of communication with horses, how they see, feel, smell, everything. I still have Paul's hand. I can't let it go. Our palms wrap so softly, they hold themselves, buoyant and free, like someone else's childhood. Now, Paul, take Billy's lead rope into your hand. He slips away from me as Rex gives Billy over. Ask her to walk the same way you asked me. Billy has her head low, resting and waiting for a signal. Paul grips the black lead rope and pulls it forward. With one quick jerk, Billy's head swings up and resists. He laughs at himself again and looks over to me. I did too much. I mean, I know that's what we've been doing, you know, making these horses do stuff instead of asking them. They're pissed at us. We've been too hard on them. Bullshit, Tony busts in. They're fucking out of control monkey shitters. We don't need to treat them like babies. Don't start, Tony. Flora takes a stance that shows she has the power to kick him back to the maintenance crew if he doesn't shut up. We're going to learn a different way. You either get in or you're out. Tony loads his fist into his pockets and looks away. Will the ranch horses ever respect us, Miss Ginger? Randy walks up from behind, looking flush and rested. If you change, they'll change, I say, and motion back to Paul to try again. This time, he pauses a moment to reflect. He scratches the cowlick on Billy's forehead. She drops her head. He leans his torso forward, pushes his leading hand out in front of her, and begins to take his first step. Billy slides along right next to him, down the road and back. Flor steps forward and asks Paul to show her how to work with Billy. I send Rex, Sarah, and Tony for the other 3 horses tied to the trailer. Rex gets Joker, an 8-year-old warm-blood gelding. Sarah releases Izzy, my 10-year-old Lusitano. Tony picks Moo, my 15-year-old Morgan. I watch as my horses' ears face sideways, taking in their new person. I show the residents how to use the shape of their human bodies as inflection. Go, stop, turn. They lean forward, they twist sideways, they breathe loud enough that I can hear them, one animal to another. Rex's long stride is equal with Joker's, who stands almost 17 hands tall. Both have a balance and a lift to their gait. Izzy is busy trying to adjust to the new curves of Sarah's body. His ears twitch in all directions, trying to keep up with her irregularities. And Moo is flat-footed, and Tony is too. Neither of them look at each other. I'm struck by how quickly my horses' personalities have changed to blend with their new person. Let's go, Izzy, Sarah sings out in a high-pitched tone. Izzy, who usually drags behind, is automatically enamored with her exuberance. He's walking briskly along, almost trotting next to Sarah, who is heading across the field, skipping and humming her favorite tune. I'm fine, I hear Flora yell behind me. Paul's giving her instructions, but she's shutting down. She and Billy haven't taken one step. I walk over out in front of Flora and Billy and look into their eyes, blank, dull, gone. I've seen Billy like this before, but not Flora. Trauma pushes everything out of a body. I try to bring them back. Hey, Flor, what's the color of the comforter on your bed at home? She pauses, looks at me, then down toward her shoes. Blue? What's the last meal you remember with your family? Baked chicken? fried bread, pintos, green chili in the crock pot. I think it was my stepdad's birthday. Okay, well, let's take a walk from your bedroom to the kitchen and sit down to eat a great meal. What do you say? I take her left hand and send her forward. Billy follows on her right side, stride matching stride. When Floor turns back, Billy follows with her head resting at the height of Floor's waist. On their return, Billy takes a deep blow, and the mist of it tickles Floor's forearm. She giggles. Behind her, Tony is having an argument with Moo. He has Moo by the lead rope, grabbing it right under Moo's chin. Moo's neck stretches out 3 feet with his front legs planted in front of his head and his back hooves pulled up and under his body. He's not moving. You are one motherfucking stubborn mule. Get your ass up here, you donkey. Tony starts to swing the end of the lead rope, and I take off at a run in their direction. Moo is my most dominant horse. He runs my herd back home. My horses take one look at Moo and walk the other way. No ear pinning, no tail swishing, no squealing. Moo eats at whichever trough he wants. He sleeps out in the softest patch of grass and sun whenever he wants, and he claims the run-in shelter when the rain and snow fall hard. No one ever challenges him because he is unquestionably in charge. I catch the end of the twirling rope from behind Tony. He snaps and turns in my direction. This horse is for shit. Why'd you bring something like this over here? We've got enough of this shit already around here. Omar and Paul run up the road behind me. I stare at Tony as my face feels like it's on fire. I could meet his darkness. I have that in me too. Minutes pass. Moo holds his position like a dead weight tractor. Any minute I expect him to scream. Moo always lets me know when trouble is near. Only once have I met a creature as messed up as Tony. It was a horse down in Ocala, Florida, a winning thoroughbred mare who refused to race, who had lashed out violently and injured her jockey and handlers. I'd gone to Florida in my early 30s to ride and study with a horse trainer named Danny Martin. Other cowboys told me about Danny, a horse trainer who took on very difficult cases, sport horses, expensive horses, dangerous horses, horses who had chased off or wounded a half dozen other trainers. The mare arrived the second day I was at Danny's. She came off the trailer loaded with muscle, stud-like. She had a double chain wrapped around her muzzle for control and to keep her from biting us. Danny asked me to put her in his indoor ring. It's an oval-shaped ring, about 100 feet long and 70 feet across. He handed me a leather strap sewn with fleece on one side. He placed a raincoat in my other hand. Put the hobble on her right front leg and get the hell out of there as fast as you can. And you'll want that raincoat too, believe me. Hobbles are used to wrap a horse's leg in a bent position, making them bear weight on just 3 legs. Hobbles are often used in the mountains and overnight pack trips so horses can't run away from camp. Danny used them differently. Most of these horses I get are just looking for trouble. People don't mean a thing to them. If they could, they'd eat us for lunch. I try to find ways they can fight themselves, and then I'll leave them to it. Not knowing why, I put on the raincoat and headed into the ring, hobble in my left hand, mare in my right. I picked her right front leg and bent it back from the knee. Wrapped the leather hobble fleece side down around her pastern joint and forearms 3 times tight. Unsnapped the chains around her face and ran out the gate. When I turned back to check on her, she exploded, running wicked on 3 legs, faster than most 4-legged horses I know. As she galloped, she sprayed piss all over me, whipping her tail and shooting the smelly, thick yellow urine every few strides. Piss that shot out like pellets against my face, pinging off my raincoat. The kind of piss I'd never seen before, like piss could be used as a weapon. Having one leg completely restrained sent her into a tantrum. I watched her run around the oval like a deranged devil. Her eyes bulged, crackled red lines squiggled across the white. Her body took on the shape of something that only knows hate. Every muscle in her body bulged with rage. We watched the show for about 10 minutes before Danny said, "Let's get back to work." We left her in misery and started working the other 20 or so horses Danny had in training. Every chance I got, I looked in on the mare. She was steamy hot with sweat and vapors that rose off her neck. She's still trying to trot or gallop away from the total ruin of her forced containment. All day long, I could hear the whirl of her inside the ring, scraping against the wooden walls in a crazed frenzy, as troubled as a spinning dog trying to eat its own tail. Danny worked us into the evening, horse after horse, until 8 o'clock when his wife called us for dinner. We shared a meal while I sat distracted. I was thinking about the mare and the possibility of leaving her like that all night. As I went to leave, I tried to be casual when I asked Danny if he'd like me to check on the mare in the indoor ring, trying not to appear the emotional woman who cared too much, who wasn't tough enough for this kind of work. He told me that if she was lying down and resting, I could take off the hobble. Otherwise, leave her the way she was. It was dark in the ring, and I didn't yet know where to find the light switch, but the moon was bright enough that I could make out her shape. She was lying on her side, her head and neck raised, but the rest of her curled up like a deer bedded down for the night. Her hobbled right foreleg was facing the ceiling. I unlatched the gate, but she didn't startle. Moving in close, I tried to soothe her with warm tones, ahs and oohs, but mostly they were for me. In case she tried to jump up, I came from behind her, letting her know I was there verbally. Kneeling to her height, I stroked her neck, the back of her head, between her ears. All I saw was a serene and resting silhouette. I reached over her back and unbuckled the hobble. She stretched her leg out stiff and leaned back into me, lengthening her neck. She laid her head to the ground while I caressed her whole body. Her hair was matted and whipped dry from all her efforts. Her breath held the rhythm of something that had been ill for some time, but now could finally settle. Tony's knuckles are turning white from pulling on Moo's face. His hair is fried from the many years of meth addiction. It looks like he's been electrocuted. He has one incisor left on the top of his mouth and 2 teeth below it. His fat tongue squeezes out around them as he clenches his jaw and leans backward, straining to force Moo to step forward. "Release the pressure, Tony," I tell him. "Give me the goddamn rope back," he shouts at me, then jerks the end of the lead rope out of my hand. He wraps the rope twice around his forearm and takes a stronger hold, forcing Moo so far off balance he stumbles forward. "What the fuck is wrong with you? Let go of my horse." Moo gathers his hind legs under and pulls back against the rope. He resets the pressure. He's never giving in. Paul and Omar come closer. Paul stands over 6 feet tall and must weigh over 230 pounds. He has a tattoo across the back of his neck that reads "Back off." Paul, who asked me to dance just moments ago, places both his hands gently on the front of my shoulders, trying to settle me down. He gives me a faint smile. "We will take care of this, Ginger," he tells me, each word measured out, slow and exact. "Tony, give that horse to Omar." Paul motions to Omar to go get Moo. Floor, Sarah, and Rex have gathered around us. They stand with their arms at their sides, legs spread, ready to jump in and help if they're needed. And no one says a word except Paul. "Let go of that horse, Tony." Paul has his back to Tony, still holding his hands on my shoulders. Tony snarls, his upper lips pressed upward, exposing his toothless gums. Paul releases me and turns slowly to face Tony. Omar stands in between Moo and Tony with his hand raised, ready to take the lead line. We are all there together, staring Tony down. He huffs, jerks his head backward, and makes a gesture with his middle finger. "Go fuck yourselves," he says, then drops Moo's lead rope to the ground. He kicks the ground with his boot and walks away, heading back toward the men's dorm. Moo lets out one long scream, The vibration of it makes the hairs on my arms stand up. Omar picks up Moo's lead and walks him back to the trailer. And Moo drops his head. He licks and then he chews, with his jaw sliding sideways around his tongue. When Sarah first called me, when she told me how the men were fighting with the horses, pinning them in the corners of the corrals and tying ropes from their halters to their tails to make them submit, she told me how they left Willie, an old black Arabian, tied and curled around like this for so long he fell over and couldn't get up. The ranch horses are fighting back. They kick, they bite, and they mean to cause harm. A prey animal turned by force into a predator. Men like Tony have punished these horses for their own pain for many years. I walk toward my trailer, my horses slow and uncertain. It's time to break for the day. Everyone needs to get cleaned up for dinner, for the GED class, or their parenting class. I load my horses one by one into the trailer, but Moo goes in last. He stops at the trailer door, refusing to load, and bends his neck around looking for something. And then he lets out one last scream. Thank you so much for being here.
That was awesome. I've never heard you read that one. Let me ask you a question that I haven't asked you before, and we're gonna have questions from the audience, anything they want to ask about the book. But I want to ask you about this time that we're in, COVID and climate collapse and fascism and all the little things. One of the things that you and I have talked about, I have talked to you about, a kind of silver lining of this time is how much time we're getting to spend with the animals. For me in particular, because I spend so much time on the road normally working, and my animals are really appreciating me being here, my horses and my sheep and my chickens and my dogs. And I feel like I'm able to give them something that I'm not able to give them consistently in at least the former life. Who knows what the future life's going to be? And that's what I want to ask you about. I feel like one of the things COVID is asking of us is to be more creaturely. I've been thinking and writing about this a lot. COVID is asking us to be more conscious of how we use things, how we travel. It's asking us to consider how good 7 or 8 hours of sleep a night feels, to eat whole foods, to make soups with ginger and turmeric, all the creaturely ways we nurture ourselves when we are not frantically running around living our bigger, wider spread lives. And also how we might live on the earth more like creatures, maybe fly less or drive less or take more care of the land, anything like that. So I'm just wondering about what the animals are teaching you right now in this time. I know you too have spent a lot of time with horses this summer, in particular, and what kinds of things you've learned this summer that may change your life going forward after the pandemic.
Yeah, interesting for me because like the pandemic and my first book coming out come together, real tight like that. So it's an interesting thing. And gratefully, I think what publishing this book got me to do is just to really honor like all the things that the animals have given me, like horses have given me. And because I was able to put it in language finally, and put it in this book, that it's changed my life forever and going forward with anything that I do with people or with horses. And then the pandemic kind of even condensed it, really. So as soon as the book tour kind of became like a non-thing because we had to shut everything down, then my phone started ringing, people with like really beautiful things that they needed, and a couple people had injuries, been hurt by horses, and really needed me, and they love their horses, and they were at this precipice of having to like either give their horse away or not. And so I was being presented with all these sort of beautiful challenges that humanity and animals, like the crossing of the blending of the two. And I didn't really have a lot of that in my horsemanship work before then. People weren't willing to kind of go to these hard places. They wanted to learn how to do a movement or wanted me to work on their canter. But now I'm getting all these calls where people want me to help them like reconnect with their, and so like the pandemic really brought up a whole lot for people and my whole work changed. And I can't be like any more grateful for that, you know, that's and for me personally, I've been waiting to get here for years, and I just didn't really have like a path towards it, you know, like trying to work more with our human animal connection. And I think, I don't know, I guess it's one of the blessings of this whole pandemic is that it's brought it forward, and people are spending a whole lot more time. Like you, Pam, I remember when you said, finally, you know, you're able to give back to your animals what they gave to you for so many years. And when you told me that, like my heart just dropped to my gut, because I feel like that's what's happened for me too, you know, that I'm able to just kind of really to launch something bigger from my heart. I have all these physical skills, you know, I can help people with the problems they're having, but I want to help more. And so that this has kind of opened that up for me.
It seems like animals are so, you know, the news is so bad all the time. And it seems like our animals are such solace now, you know, they're so steady and they're so grounding, you know, in a time when we're all so frightened.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. I guess I'll ask you one more question before we talk a little bit about airmail for a minute. And that is really just a simple question that I've never asked you before, which is, what was the hardest chapter to write? And what was the most fun?
Oh, okay. What was the hardest one, which you already know, was Skinless, which is a chapter all about my youth and my sexuality and my gender confusion. Because I didn't write that until like the very, very end. And what was the most fun to write, which I almost read tonight, but it was too much out of context, was that beautiful chapter about Walmart and my experience in Espanola, which is my little hometown. And I live in the minority in my community. I am in like the 10th percentile. And when I go into my Walmart, it's not like the rest of this country. It's mostly all native and all Spanish and some Spanish Mexican mix. And I write this chapter that came to me out of a workshop that I did with Pam and Lydia Yuknovich. Anyhow, that's my favorite chapter. I don't know if it was fun, but I know I cried all the way through it, but I'm so glad I wrote it. But anyhow, let's talk about airmail. I want to talk a little tiny bit about airmail. Pam gave me an early copy. So it's with Pam and Amy Irvine. It's Airmail, Letters of Politics, Pandemics in Place. I wanted it to get a little plug tonight because my God, is this a good book? I'm going to buy one for every great person I know. We need to read it now. We need to read it after the election, but it would be really important for everybody to read it now. And I think whoever's here, I really want you to think about buying a copy for every amazing woman you know and every amazing man you know, because I think it has so much to say, not just about gender. It's not that simple, but the way we all try so hard and sometimes fail. And I think this book is a little bit like how we fail sometimes. Um, it is so fierce. I just can't tell you. I just love this book. So I wanted Pam to, and I love it for the reasons that don't make me feel so good, but it's the many things that I have not heard too many people talk about. And so I don't know what Pam's going to read, but it's a book. It's a beautifully small book too. It has this amazing feel, and it's Torrey House Press, which is all women run press. But there's just, I mean, Amy Irvin, I don't know her, but I want to know her. She is a beast. And you two together are quite something. And I don't know that you guys knew what a force you were going to be when you started this, but what a team.
Well, we just came back from 6 readings live, outside, masked and distanced, because the book is kind of semi out. The pub date is October 13th, but now that Amy and I are going to be doing one of these readings for the 3 bookstores that are here tonight, I bet you they'll be able to get books sooner than October 13th, even though our reading's not till after the election. And we did rush everything to try to get it out before the election to try to make some small difference. But we just came back from 6 readings, and it was so gratifying, even though the readings were like, they could only have 25 people, and like people came up and they were just like, oh, you made me feel so much better, and I'm going to go home and sign up to be a poll watcher. Like it is doing exactly what we wanted. It's making people motivated to step into their own power and take action, which is what we were hoping for. And it really has been, even just in this little week of readings, which we've done, it feels,
you feel it. You can feel it.
It feels powerful out there, and I don't know how many people's hands, will put their hands on this book, but however many it is, it's better than 0. So, yeah. So I'll just read, I'm going to read just 2 little short sections. When Amy and I are on in November, we'll read much more. But I'm going to read just the very opening letter, which is the Dear Reader letter, which is the intro, and then 1 letter from about the middle of the book. Dear Reader, when we began writing letters to each other in March of 2020, shortly after the COVID-19 outbreak led to Colorado's governor issuing a statewide stay-at-home order, we had never met and only knew each other through the books we had written. These books were all, in one way or another, about how the earth's wild places saved us, raised us, mothered us, and brought us back to life. We live on opposite sides of the Continental Divide, on opposite sides of the San Juan mountain range. The rain that falls onto Pam's high mountain meadow will make its way eventually to the Atlantic Ocean, while the rain that falls onto Amy's high desert mesa will run toward the Pacific. The land between our houses, much of it over 10,000 feet in elevation, is arguably the most beautiful and wildest country in the lower 48. In a culture defined by Twitter and the 24-hour news cycle, writing letters felt like ritual, intimate, ancient, 2 barn owls calling to each other across a starry sky. As the reality of COVID set in, our letters became a life raft of clarity in days filled with increasing numbers of the dead and the incessant dismantling of our government from within. In them, we could rage and cry, hold each other up, and talk ourselves back into agency, back into hope, back into action. We could hear each other's voices and our own ringing like a bell, reminding us that the fight to save the earth is what we were born for. Eventually, we could hear your voice too, dear reader, your fear for the future and your passion for the land. Welcome. You are the one we've been waiting for. We've caught up to a future we could not imagine, but we've known all along we were ready. We'll see you soon in the sky, Amy and Pam. And then I'll just jump forward. This is a letter I haven't read aloud, but I mean, other than in my own little room while I was editing. So this is from April 17th. Hey, Amy. I love all your letters, but I might love this last one most of all. A lamb was born here today. To my old matriarch, Jordan. It is late for lambs, and I only have 2 ewes left after a 350-pound black bear came down the mountain a couple of years ago and decimated my herd. And I would have thought Jordan might be done. She's 8 if she's a day, and maybe 9 or 10. But when I went out to feed this morning, she had that look in her eye, pushing out little Lamaze breaths. And so I separated her into the horse stall and left her alone, which is what she prefers, and came inside and finished Rebecca Solnit's book about feminism and hope. 2 hours later, the lamb was already up and nursing, a dark brown color with the tightest little curls imaginable. I wanted to leave them alone today, but fingers crossed, it is a little ewe. We have 2 rams here at the moment, and 2 is already one too many. As I watched the days in April tick by, I thought maybe we weren't going to have any lambs this year, that my surviving ewes were too old and too traumatized. I was okay with it. I mean, don't we have enough going on without worrying whether an aging ewe has enough milk to sustain a lamb? Or whether the smell of her udder is enough to bring another bear down the mountain to stalk us? But when I made eye contact with Jordan this morning in her semi-distress, she's such an old hand at this, I realized I had been wrong to hope for the easy way out. And new life is new life. If there was ever a year I can attend to the needs of my Icelandics, it's this one. And I imagine Elsie will drop here in a week or 2. And by the looks of her belly, now that I'm no longer in denial, she probably has twins. Plus, if we are in need of metaphors, there are no ewes tougher than Icelandic ewes. Ask any shearer that question and they will confirm. Jordan, in fact, fought the black bear with her head in his mouth for some period of time because the morning after the massacre, she had 4 holes in her neck, one you could have put a corn cob inside of. The ewes and lambs were inside. The bear ripped the barn door right off its hinges. She got stitched up. We gave her shots every day for a month, and she came through. She stomps her little hooves hard at the dogs, and all her life has nursed the orphans. She watched that bear kill generations of her babies 2 years ago, and here she is, persisting through the pandemic. I love your story about the dude in the black truck, in part because it so easily could have happened to me, and I would have been stripping in the car and lighting my clothes on fire in the front yard when I got home, and maybe not even realizing it wasn't fear of disease that was making me do it. You have every right to write. I think I say this later, but a cowboy guy hugged her right at the start of the pandemic at a gas station. And it was, anyway, I think I say more about this later in the letter. That's what I'm referring to there. You have every right to write about the ferocity of women, more right than some writer, if there is such a person, who is so sure of herself she responds correctly every time. Rebecca Solnit's new book is about how we grew up in a culture where violence toward women, where stories of women's erasure were so common, whether we were personally abused or not, whether we were raped or not, whether we were cut up into little pieces and shoved into the back of some guy's refrigerator, the fact it was happening 2 blocks or 2 miles or 2 states away almost continuously made us less confident, less free, less able to say automatically, "Don't you fucking touch me," when someone tries to hug us at a liquor store during a pandemic. But you and I, each in our own way, grew up in your father's duck blind. We thought because we could make the boys forget we were girls and keep up with them on the double black diamonds and rock faces, we had circumvented the kind of danger those urban girls ran into when they walked home from work on the streets of San Francisco. But we were still trained to please those men, to feed their egos, to let them instruct us in the proper way of wrapping our oars in duct tape, even though we had been on the river for 10 years and it was their very first season. Jess. The guy hugging you makes me want to shriek so loud you could hear it on the other side of the San Juan range, but would I have shrieked if it had been me who he had hugged? Also, his hugging is so loaded in so many different ways, a flirt, a test, a political assertion. It makes me want to take a shower. The bear that put Jordan's head in his mouth stalked us for more than a month after the first massacre, And I slept with my windows open and went charging out there with the shotgun the fish and game warden loaned me every time I heard a noise. I'd boarded up the broken door by then, and one night as I ran screaming for the barn barefoot in my nightshirt, the bear came flying out a newly broken window at me, gave me one long look, and galloped up the hillside in the other direction. He didn't kill anybody that night. I caught him in time. But thinking now of those nights I ran straight at him make me realize how much I would rather die by 350-pound black bear or canyoneering accident or lightning or great white shark than by a hug from a guy with a MAGA sticker. You have no doubt by now seen Josh Bickle's photograph from the Columbus Dispatch, which ought to win a Pulitzer, the zombie apocalypse photo of the Trumpies clawing at the window of the Ohio State House, protesting social distancing, and of course, breathing and spitting and panting all over each other in the process. So much for the goodness of the citizenry. When I saw it, and the Michigan protests, saw specifically a MAGA-hatted young man purposely blow in the face of the masked reporter on site, I kind of startled awake and thought, oh, the Civil War is actually underway now. But instead of shooting each other, we are breathing on each other. And here we are back around again to the breath. I think we're going to be home for a long time. And I think the longer we are home, the more hope there is the world will change in giant ways. I know these will be hard changes because so many will be desperately poor and many others will die, perhaps us among them. But will there ever be a better case made for a Green New Deal? Could trickle-down economics finally die the death that's been waiting for it for 3 decades? I read an article today suggesting that the people who are dying so furiously from COVID may be dying because of their exposure to Roundup, that Roundup is in our gas tanks in the form of ethanol. And so people who live near highways are dying more, harder, and faster than people who don't. This correlates with other studies that show places with bad air see a 25% higher mortality rate from COVID. And the reason may be 1 chemical or 100 chemicals. But after I finished the article, I thought, if we have known one damn thing for decades, it's that Roundup kills people. How fucked up are we that we would rather be dead than have weeds? A friend who works kind of against his will in a sporting goods store told me last night that when people come in to buy guns and they have to run background checks, there are usually on average about 50 background checks in the system at one time. And in the weeks right before and right after the shelter in place order went into effect, that number went to 13,000. I don't know whether that's nationwide or statewide or for this particular chain of stores, but whatever it is, the ratio is the point. My very top priority at the moment is not to let Trump kill me. And I believe that extends to anyone wearing a MAGA hat or camo. And by kill, I mean shoot me or breathe on me. I know that's not a very altruistic or even useful goal, but all the useful shit I might do during or after the pandemic is predicated on staying alive. Do I believe Trump is my father returned from the dead to kill me? I wish I could qualify my yes somehow, but all qualifications sound like a lie. I'd rather take one of my own Wusthof cooking knives to the breast or swan dive off Muley Point than let one of those motherfuckers in the Columbus Dispatch photo breathe on me. I know I'm supposed to have compassion for their desperation, but I spent that compassion years ago, which might mean I am ready for battle. The death of a beautiful woman is unquestionably the most poetical topic in the world, said Edgar Allan Poe via Rebecca Solnit, who notes, he must not have imagined it from the perspective of women who prefer to live. I've ridden those little Mongolian horses and I like their spirit. I followed the Przewalski horses for miles across the Mongolian steppes with my camera and I liked them too. The Icelandic horses are not unlike those Mongolians, compact, tough, generous, sure-footed. Maybe the horses are more than a metaphor. Maybe they are actual horses, like the ones who saved you after Ruby was born. Maybe this is what the West was made for, a place where horses and women can work in tandem to smash gender roles and overturn the patriarchy, the oligarchy, ban Roundup forever, make gaslighting a crime that carries with it 25 years in prison, rename all the rivers and buildings and national parks after grocery store clerks and ICU nurses and UPS drivers. Maybe the world has been waiting for horses and women to team up again, like they did way back when in Mongolia. When I am on the back of a horse I trust, I feel its determination and courage rise right up through me. It would not be the worst way to go. to be shot off the back of a large-hearted horse. It must be late if my fantasies have turned to actual, if somewhat archaic, war death, so that means I should probably stop. There is a way to fight this madness and a way to win. And life with my father made me into someone who belongs on the front line. I just have to figure out the morality of that, the best way to do it, which I think is at the heart of these conversations. I hope you are well over there. It's morning now and looks like it's going to be a pretty one. Going to go out and check on Jordan and the lamb, whom we have named Becky. Love to you from this side, Pam.
Oh, yeah. So, like I said, it's pretty fierce. Oh my God, right?
And that's just the middle. We get
That's like, oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, we don't have a whole lot of time, but one quick question for Pam, just so we can, you guys didn't know each other at all. You knew each other as writers, but you didn't know each other at all. And you most recently met physically in person. And what was that like? Since the book's now out, just give a little bit of like that, because
it was great. We didn't meet at all, even through the editing process. We met after the book was already sent to the publisher. And we were in Santa Fe, and Amy's daughter, Ruby, was getting her service dog. So it was like a big day because like neither of us live in Santa Fe, but we were both there for different reasons. And Ruby's service dog was having her first sleepover in their hotel room. And I brought cheeseburgers and malts, and we sat outside her hotel room at the El Rey, like 25 feet apart, because you remember that was when nobody knew anything about how it moved. And we talked until like 1 a.m. Like I showed up at 5 with burgers and malts, and I went home at 1, and
wow.
it was great. Like that was the first day. And now we've been in it, and we've been touring, and but even still, we've spent so little time together, and we really know each other pretty well.
Yeah, yeah. It's just such the book, knowing you so well, I'm just stunned at the commingling of spirits and how fierce Amy is, and just what a match you guys are. We're just like a wonderful thing together. Just, oh, so I hope everybody got a good flavor for that, because that's how that book goes, man. It just keeps coming and it keeps coming, and then one chapter feeds to the next, and there's elk and there's horses and there's warrior women, and oh, it just never stops. So,
we talk each other up for sure.
I have a couple questions, and then we'll get to some audience questions too. And just on the subject of letters, I'm curious, and really for both of you, was letter writing a habit of yours before COVID, or is it something that kind of kicked in during that? Because I know, I have a lot of friends who is probably different for writers, but who aren't writers, who, all of a sudden that was like the thing to do, was to write letters.
really, that's good to hear. Because like I think letters are kind of almost gone. So I've been since like college trying to write letters, physical mailable letters, and still do that to certain friends, but it's almost gone. Now we have the email, which is a little longer than the text. It's basically gone. And for me, it was a way that I could finally talk to my father, because we didn't have a language together in person. So I learned to write. I wrote him letters when I was in college, and I wrote all about my childhood and the things I was concerned about and worried about. And he finally started writing back. And so he and I had this wonderful exchange close to when he died. And it was the way I know that my father knows who I am, and loves me and loved me. Yeah. How about you, Pam? Do you write lots of letters? This is new.
It feels like a lot of important relationships in my life have letters in them. Mike and I got married 2 years ago to like the coolest straight white man. In a later letter, I call him the best straight white man I know. And we were living apart, even though we lived near each other here. I was on the road and in Davis and everywhere. So we really made our relationship out of letters. My dear friend Fenton Johnson, author, from the Center of All Beauty, most recently, one of my favorite books in the whole world, Scissors, Paper, Rock. We've been friends for 32 years, and he still writes and mails letters. He's so good about it. And I'm not as good. I tend to write back an email, which I will do and take seriously, but he still mails letters. This Airmail was born out of Orion magazine. The editor there, Sumanth Prabhakar, asked Amy to contribute to this series called Together Apart, and asked her who she wanted to correspond with. And she wanted to correspond with me, because when she first read Cowboys Are My Weakness, she threw it across the room. Like back when she was much younger. We were all much younger in 1992 when Cowboys Are My Weakness came out, and she was so mad at it, she hurled it across the room. And since then we had seen each other on Facebook, and I had blurred Desert Cabal, and we had these connections, even though we'd never met or never really talked. And she picked me, and Sumanth said, okay. And so the first few letters in this book were for that Orion thing. So it was really Orion's idea to get two writers writing letters to each other.
Well, you got it right, picking you. That's for sure. Ooh-wee.
Yeah, it sounds really great. I have a letter anecdote that, it's never really been a big part of my life. I've exchanged letters with my grandma for most of my life, but I bought a house in North Carolina when I lived there, and the house had been, the people who had lived there and who had built the house had both passed away, and the house went to the bank, and then I bought it from the bank, or somebody else bought it, flipped it, and then I bought it from that person, and all their stuff was still in the attic. And when I went up there to clean everything out, I found a box of probably 150, 200 letters that were all from the woman to the man, but from when they were like 16 years old. Falling in love, and it was just really cool. I returned them all to a family member that I found in the area, but for like a month and a half, I laid in bed and read these love letters between them, and it was really something. There's something to, I think, like the epistolary format for telling a narrative, whether it's true or not. I love fiction that's told through letters also. So I think I'm really looking forward to Airmail.
I think this is going to stand alone. To be honest, this book's going to stand alone in this category. Besides that, it's pandemic and it's political. You don't get a chance to publish two women who are just going straight at it. And it's nicey, and I heard this, and not, some of the letters are beautiful. I mean, I love, like you said, Lane, I love that format, but this is something else. Like it's on its own little, and I really do believe that there is not another book of two women going at it like this in letter writing that has ever been published. I not like this.
Fantastic. If you ever want to come work and sell books for me, you're absolutely welcome to. I have one more question coming from me, and then we can get to some audience questions. And this is something that both of you could probably speak to a little bit, and it's something that does come up in your book, but the idea of body language and also just connection to animals. And I grew up around horses as well, and it's been quite a while since I've really interacted, with them at any kind of great extent, but there does seem to be something really special about horses in particular. At least I've found that, and the way that they can I think I have felt the most seen by horses above really any other animal, I think. And I was wondering if either of you could speak to that or agree with that, or like that.
Well, I think that's great that you feel the most seen. That's beautiful. I don't know. I mean, I think Pam is probably on the scale of dog to horse. The dogs might be a little higher, but I do think the instincts of the horse and their sight that their ability, everything about the horse is about movement and language. Movement is their language. And so I think you probably feel seen because they see you, like they see every little thing that your face does, and every little tiny thing that I'm doing right now is all totally visible to them. And that's how they take in their world. I don't mean to put it into a behavioral context. Like that is their physical, emotional ground of being, call it spiritual life. And they live that. And so I feel like we get seen so much by them because they live it in such a big way. And it's so easy for us humans to think that, oh, that because of flight, they can see better and they need the sense of smell and flight. But when you see them just moseying around in a corral and how much they're taking in, and we as humans don't even notice 1/10 of what they're taking in. So I think you're seeing it right, that they see you fully, like from the outside to the inside. And there's a part in the book where I talk about like the body fluids inside each of our bodies. I think they even can tell how content and how troubled we are. That all of those things are physically, they can actually sense those things. So that's my thing with Pam.
Well, it's true. I've been more intimate with more dogs than I have horses, but I've always had horses in my life. Moo, who Ginger read about just now, is actually out in my pasture right now. He's having a little vacation at my house, and he's such an amazing horse. He's just an amazing being. I mean, he's incredible. But in any case, I do think because I think our interaction, I always think of horses as mirrors, more so than dogs, because like dogs love us no matter what they do, like dogs just keep wagging their tail and like showing up for us. But horses, you can turn a horse away from you a lot easier than a dog, I think. And I also think because like I used to ride stadium show jumpers back in the day. And, with a horse, we notice more their reactions to us because we have our own safety invested in it. Like if you're gonna jump over a 6-foot fence on a horse or a 4-foot fence on a horse, like you got to be paying attention to how that horse is feeling about you at every second, as opposed to when you're walking your dog. Our safety is so wrapped up in how they're feeling about us. So I think we see it more.
Yeah.
And I also think they know that too. They're like, I always think like the metaphor for everything in life is a horse and a rider approaching a jump, because the horse is saying, can I trust you? Can I trust you? Are you with me? Can I trust you? And the rider is saying, can I trust you? Can I trust you? Can I trust you? And, because it gets so, narrowed down to that moment of, is the horse going to refuse the jump, or is he going to sail over it? And is the rider going to yank on his mouth, or is she going to keep her seat? It's everything gets focused to that one moment. And if trust fails, the whole thing fails and everybody gets hurt, maybe badly, so it's just, to me, it's such a great metaphor of going into anything, with another being, be it a horse or a dog or a human.
Yeah.
We do have an audience question that really can be for both of you. Thinking about the first part of Ginger's talk, are we longing for the ability to genuinely celebrate our differences? And extending my question to Pam, how do we learn to celebrate our political differences as well?
I long, yeah. Where are we longing to belong is like kind of what I was pondering. And so I think that goes to the same thing with like the question towards Pam. It's like, I'm longing to belong with people who I have nothing in common with which is most of the time in my community. But I also want that same longing to come back towards me. And so if we're in a situation we're not there, we're in a situation where those that we want to we want to cross over our political divide, but if we do, and I do, because I live in a family with probably half Republicans that are going to vote for Trump and half who aren't. And so I live in, my family is my kind of microcosm of my world. So I long to belong with the level of diversity that we live in, and then we can't, we're not going back. We're not going back to just being all white people with all white culture. We're not going back there anymore. And so I long for that. And I hope that some people on the other side are longing back towards me, longing back towards the vision of being okay with transgender people. And I see it, even in my sisters, who are teachers, I hear it in their conversations. We might not be on the same political trajectory, but they are teachers, and they are learning to understand transgender people and gay people in their schools. So I don't know if that answers anything, but that's how I would love to see it. That if we can just start to feel like we want to belong somewhere where it's not comfortable, right? We can't just be comfortable in where we want to be. Go ahead, Pam. Hit it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know really what the spirit behind that question is, celebrate our political differences. I feel like we've gone so far off the rails, honestly. I can't, I live here in this place that's mostly Republican. I don't honestly know how many of those people support Trump. A lot of them, but I'm sure there are some that don't. I don't think of Trump as Republican, and I don't think of him as conservative. I understand people with conservative values. The man who has delivered my hay for 26 years has conservative values. I love him like a father. We talk a little bit about politics. It's okay. But to me, Trump is a whole nother thing. Trump is monstrous and racist and a rapist and, and a few other things. And so I can't celebrate my differences with anyone who supports his agenda. That's just the truth. I mean, so can the Republican Party remake itself separate from Trump so that they, want, states' rights and low impact government? And yeah, we can have those arguments all day long, and we can celebrate all those voices. But what's happened now is a catastrophe, and it's a catastrophe for democracy, and it's a catastrophe for Native people, and a catastrophe for Black people, and it's a catastrophe for women. And it will eventually be a catastrophe for white men too. They just don't know it yet, but it's coming. So I can't, there's no language I can put to saying, oh, I'm sure we're all good people and we can work it out. I just don't have that language anymore. It's gone. I don't feel that way about conservative Republicans. I feel that way about Trumpists. And I can't be, I can't pretend.
Otherwise, nope.
Yeah. And I have another question that you all were kind of talking about a little bit earlier that will end on a kind of hopefully lighter note. And I only have a couple buzzwords to go off of here, but the donkey poop story that came from, so Jess is the events coordinator at Country Bookshelf in Bozeman, who is kind of behind the scenes of all, there she is. I don't know if you were involved in this or not, but I'm really curious about what
the bomb.
Yeah, what the story is.
Do you want me to tell the donkey poop story?
Yeah.
Okay. So I had two miniature donkeys, Isaac and Simon. Unfortunately, Simon's not with us anymore. Isaac is still making trouble on the daily. But I got these donkeys when they were kind of young. They were a rescue from a hoarding situation. And they came to the ranch, and they were only like, they were less than 2, and they were a little small. And because they were so small, I have a walkthrough in my pasture, and the pasture is fenced for horses, but the donkeys were skinny enough that they could get through the human walkthrough. And so I thought, well, that's okay. They can come and go. They can come into the yard and into the pasture, and it's fine. It'll be fine. Well, the dogs were affronted by the fact that the donkeys had ultimate freedom. And so they chased the dogs. They chased the donkeys. And sometimes the donkeys would turn around and chase back. And Isaac's got big square teeth, and he could nip at a dog, but the dogs are actually taller than the donkeys. And run harder and faster. They're built for that kind of chase in a way that the donkeys aren't. And so I just tried to keep peace and thought they'll work it out. They'll figure it out. And then one day I had to go to the valley to buy a whole bunch of horse food and dog food and people food, which is like about a 4 or 5 hour round trip by the time I get down there and do my shopping and come back. And I came back loaded with the car loaded. And I got to the end, and I had just left the dogs inside, and I had left all the equine gates open so that the horses and the donkeys could hang out in the yard and eat the sweet grass, which is sweeter than the pasture. So I pull up to the gate, and Deseo, my Pasifino, is like whinnying and whinnying and whinnying, which usually means somebody's dead. So I go flying up the driveway thinking, what's wrong? And I catch Deseo, and he's all sweaty. And I talk to him, and I count bodies, like this many chickens, this many sheep, this many horses, this many donkeys. Everyone seems to be here. Nobody seems to be dead. So I go to unload, and I step up onto the dog porch, which is the dog's terrain. It now has a couch, but it didn't used to. It used to just have, which is the dog couch, but it used to just have dog beds and dog bowls, and it was where they hung out. And I stepped up on the dog porch, and at first, I wasn't even sure what exactly I was looking at. And then I realized very quickly that the donkeys had climbed on their little donkey hooves up the 3 steps to the dog porch, and they had shit all over everything. They had shit and shit. They had shit on every dog bed. They had pulled the dog beds apart so they could shit on the ones underneath. They had shit into a cooler that I had drying on the dog porch. They had kicked the dog bowls over. They had smeared shit onto the porch railings. It seemed utterly impossible that 2 donkeys could make that much shit in 5 hours. And I had to wonder if they had saved up, if they had known somehow that I was going to the valley. It was an incredible shit-a-thon, and it was clearly directed at the dogs because nothing else on the whole ranch had been tampered with. And that was when I understood that donkeys are actually smarter than horses, or at least more vindictive. And I also understood that I had to make a little gate so that everyone could live harmoniously and separately. That is the donkey story.
That's the donkey shit story.
That's the donkey shit story.
Well, on that note,
happier than talking about Trump.
running out of time. Ginger and Pam, if you had any thing to add as we kind of wrap here.
One thing to those of you who are wanting to buy these books, and it's something we've talked about earlier, but a lot of these book events, the bookstores aren't really getting the benefit of the purchases. A lot of people are buying the books from elsewhere or not. So I think it's really important to say that at these Zoom events, really try to, if you're interested in our books and you haven't read them, please try to buy them from one of these 3 stores that is hosting this event. And I hope more bookstores and authors talk about that please, if you're interested, please, you've got to buy them from your local bookstore. please.
The independent bookstore is one of the greatest stays against fascism. That's a fact.
Yeah.
And not only that, they're wonderful people doing a labor of love every day. And I personally don't have a career without independent bookstores. Never did, never would have. And so yes, absolutely buy your books from one of these 3 stores.
Yeah.
And I bet you these 3 stores will get airmail sooner than October 13th. That's my prediction.
Gonna do our best, and thank you both for saying that. It's, I know, work that we are all very happy and honored to do. So yeah, I guess on that note, thank you both, Ginger and Pam. We look forward to selling airmail and selling more copies of Half Broke. And yeah, I think that is a wrap. Oh, and I should add, actually, we do have an event with Pam for airmail in November. So you can look at the calendar. I don't have it in front of me, but you can look at the calendar at booksincommonnw.com to check that out. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Bye, Lane. Bye,
All
Jeff.
right, good to see y'all.